The trouble with truthing. In my latest book, The World Cult and You, I explore an extremely controversial hot-button topic that has triggered a lot of people. I'm talking about the radical idea that truthers and truthing might be dangerous, and that trauma bonding relative to doomsday scenarios might be a symptom of collective mental illness and blind adherence to cult groupthink. After publication of my book, which contains a number of playfully challenging memes addressing different aspects of this decidedly unhealthy scenario, I created another that reads, "Stop helping doomsday cults bring about doomsday using your energy." One way to understand what's going on in this bizarrely self-defeating situation is to examine the world cult through the lens of the human energy, sometimes referred to as loosh. Loosh can be used to do literally anything because it's a form of pure consciousness, the life force itself. You can also call it chi, prana, orgone, torsion energy, scalar waves, even imagination. These are all merely variations on the central theme of all world cult dynamics, human power. This fundamental energy can be used to build positive outcomes, harmonious structures, communities, technologies, even worlds. But it can also be harnessed to create hell on Earth. We currently find ourselves in a weird feedback loop in this simulated dreamscape of a worldwide civilization seemingly controlled by a great parasite that keeps rerouting human energy to create less than desirable outcomes for humanity. In this scenario, doomsday cults of all kinds are allowed to thrive online and off because they serve the great parasite's fear-based agenda. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about bona fide doomsday cults or more camouflaged truther cults masquerading as YouTube channels focused on the plasma apocalypse, Wormwood, Agenda 2030, the Phoenix Phenomenon, or what have you. All such mind-controlling organizations are used by the great parasite to bend the spoon of reality in a doomsday direction here in this loosh siphoning matrix. When you give doomsday or other fear-mongering cults your attention, just your attention, simply by listening to their words, and certainly by subscribing to them, sending them likes, shares, follows, and even money, you too are promoting doomsday. Attention, as I see it, is the faculty of focusing the life force. When you allow your attention to be focused by another mind, it can create with your personal power, your loosh in this case, what it will. Realize that nothing any of these truthers are saying is inherently true because there's no they're there to begin with in this construct. It's all made up. You're choosing to buy into somebody or something else's narrative. Simple as that. We can easily extrapolate this dynamic even to works of literature, movies, shows, music, and other things on whose altars you place the sacred gift of your attention. When you think about it this way, human sacrifice is more prevalent today than ever. Our individual attention is exceedingly powerful. But when our attentions, plural, come together in an aligned group, we're talking laser-like potential on a vast scale. In signing a tacit contract by attending to things that don't contain inspiration or optimism, grasp that your energy can and will be used against you by the world cult. It's bewildering how much reluctance there is to embrace and support messages of individual empowerment such as mine. Could this be because there are so few genuine individuals, in the sense of being individuated, in this period of orchestrated chaos in which tribalism is making a fierce comeback? Or perhaps optimism is largely dismissed because it appears to contradict the so-called facts, even though facts, like weather patterns, can and do change as the scientific narratives that establish facts change, or maybe the comparatively sane voices of hope are ignored because trauma-based mind control produces addiction to despair in the masses, a kind of Stockholm syndrome throughout the world cult. Whatever the case, the very word hopium is, in my opinion, just another clever psyop employed by the great parasite's minions to detract and distract from the empowering notion that positivity by itself can change the world. It's a maxim that where attention goes, energy usually flows. Or as the famous line from Field of Dreams phrases it, if you build it, he will come. Focus on a fairy tale city on a hill and someday you just might live there. Sadly, in this upside-down construct, when you broadcast fear at the top of your lungs, the algorithm can't get enough of you. The upshot is that you receive a wildly disproportionate amount of attention, especially considering that your message is, despite any and all positive window dressing, anti-human garbage. Hope panhandles while fear sells like hotcakes. This may lean toward the cliche, but it's the way things are, right now anyway. A fearful outlook leads to behaviors that are ultimately self-sabotaging, self-abnegating, because they're products of trauma-based mind control. My research into shamanism has led me to conclude that the majority of the population are downloaded with the consciousness of the great parasite, and they're using its mind as their operating system. In other words, freakish as this might seem at first blush, people aren't really even thinking with their own minds. In a sense, we're really not even up against mind control. We're faced with the far more troubling prospect of mind ownership by an absentee owner. No wonder members of the world cult can't see the forest for the trees, can't see the positive, can't see the potential for transformation that's all around, but more importantly, inside them. But I'm not here to focus on the negative, despite the heaviness and darkness that are nearly palpable to anyone with a shred of their own consciousness intact. I propose, in fact, that the incessant fear-mongering we're witnessing today is ironically a tool implemented at the behest of the great parasite to wake the flock up. Yes, I'm suggesting that the great parasite is actually here to teach us about who we are and the world we live in. When you step back from it, you realize that the whole idea of so many fearful conspiracies proliferating, like harmful bacteria everywhere, isn't just unreal or overkill. It's ludicrous. This reality is so obviously unreal. It's like bad screenplay writing. No matter how many times you see the same script playing out on the world stage, it's simply not believable. Could this be by design? Part of the great parasite's wake-up strategy for humanity? In The World Cult and You, I touch on the process of awakening that many seekers like myself have gone through, coming face to face with conspiracies galore after doing the research and all that runaround. I explicitly state that I'm not saying not to explore your interests, not to think critically, etc. I also emphasize that there comes a time when you realize that everything you've discovered through your research has basically been fed to you because you've been looking for it. We're in a complex feedback loop, or for most people, feedback loosh, that reveals to us a reality that we choose to buy into just before it becomes our reality. So many things are put out to make it seem that we're helpless victims of this crazy funhouse. This is the purpose of false narratives about being in a soul trap or reincarnation trap. Obviously, such a worldview isn't compatible with, say, a Christian eschatological perspective with a definitive end date to the status quo. Yet if you keep feeding your research into the construct, it will keep giving back to you precisely what you're looking for. If you get interested in something else and start researching that, suddenly the construct starts feeding back to you new information to support your new viewpoint. It's like magic, because it is. If you take a moment to compare the two things you've been researching, you'll see they're mutually exclusive. Yet you've uncovered mountains of evidence supporting both theories. This is what's happening on a massive, multifaceted scale in the conspiracy theory community. The problem is that the entire smorgasbord of conspiracy evidence is just fabrications of consciousness. It doesn't prove anything, except that consciousness is really, really creative. The construct is, with a wink and a nod as it were, clearly just playing your perceptions back to you in endless variations. At some point, the only logical conclusion is that this is all in your mind. That's the wake-up moment when you finally slap your forehead and say, I'm creating all this insanity. And then the all-important follow-up question, so what do I want to create now that I'm conscious that I'm creating? From the perspective of consciousness expansion, it's actually a service to us to have so much weirdness thrown in our faces over and over again. The weirdness might very well be, it's at least worth considering, part of our own design from some higher aspect of ourselves to wake us up here in the dream. We're not talking about narcissism. We're talking about solipsism. This is the idea that there's only one of us here, a creative consciousness experiencing permutations of itself for whatever reason. This notion is often ridiculed by truthers. That should tell you something. When you experience the full impact of what I'll call the solipsistic awakening, you're not staring at your navel. You're staring into infinity. You've also just been handed a massive plateful of personal accountability. This is a Peter Parker watershed moment when you realize that with tremendous power comes tremendous responsibility. Is manifestation always getting exactly what your ego wants? I don't think so. Manifestation is, in my opinion, getting exactly what the wiser part of you knows you need. And then the less wise part of yourself has to deal with the after effects. Such a situation is the opposite of narcissism, because you experience awe in relation to what is and are humbled, as opposed to having your ego pumped up. In a world where there's only one of us here, narcissism and runaway ego simply dissipate because, well, who is there to impress? Who is there to control, except yourself? Let's include in yourself your own responses to the very things you're creating and then having to live with. With that said, I suggest that you choose your life and world wisely. Subscribing is vibing and sharing is caring. Is it too much to ask too much? Read or listen to The World Cult and You with your free trial at solakmansubstack.com.